damn it. I'm extremely upset. This year was going so well up into October. Well, today we're going over the newest Tier 10 Premium to be released. The first Tier 10 Premium light tank, the unbelievably ridiculous Vigilante T249. This anti-aircraft vehicle makes its way into the game as one of our two new black tanks for 2024, with a new autocannon type to debut alongside it. Because it's a black tank, let's quickly go over the fact that this tank has a 25% silver bonus as a tier 10. Yay! It's not going to be printing silver, but hey, it's there. Now about that new breed of autocannon. We went over them briefly in the last video, but some important stuff was left out because I hadn't read the paragraph on the game guide itself written for the rotary autocannons. I only read about the overheat mechanics since I figured the spin-up delay was the only new thing to know about the rotary autocannons themselves. But there is another feature I'm calling chip damage for these tanks. That article states that rotary autocannons also have the chance to cause a small amount of damage on non-penetrating hits. Yeah, so you don't need to pen to do damage, which is odd, isn't it? Because before we even get into the tank stats, I think we're all well aware of how low the pen is on this tank. It's 75mm of AP pen and 26mm of HE pen. So we were all thinking the pen is very limiting, right? And that the gun would be completely useless unless fighting the ideal tank or ideal flanking scenario against specific tanks. But then we just accepted that there would be tanks you cannot do damage to whatsoever. But no, you can chip away at tanks regardless of needing to pen them or not. And yes, it may be super low damage, like 1 to 5 damage a shot I've seen, but damage is damage, and when you have so much ammo and it's super quick to mag dump, that damage will add up, and you're not completely useless like we all thought the tank would be against armored tanks. In fact, it's much easier to damage armored tanks in this one compared to other lights that have to aim at weaknesses and pen. This thing can just auto-lock and spray for less than 4 seconds and get guaranteed damage no matter what. It's kind of absurd in my opinion. And the best part is that the chip damage only functions on the AP rounds. And you might think, well, that's because the HE will do damage already without penning, right? So the chip damage doesn't work on the HE because HE should have it inherently, right? And you would be correct in thinking that logically, but actually the HE doesn't have enough splash radius or pen to do any bit of splash damage. It does no splash damage to armored tanks, and it's super unreliable even against low armored tanks because of its super low pen. So you're literally better off not loading a single HE clip because the chip damage from the AP means your AP acts like HE and has the power to pen when it can. It's so counterintuitive and backwards, and I think it'd be better off if they moved it over to the HE rounds only and took chip damage off of the AP rounds entirely. But with that important bit up front and out of the way, we can now go over the gun itself. It's a 37mm Gatling gun. It deals 25 damage per round with a 0.02 second intraclip with 192 rounds in a clip. That means it unloads its clip in 3.84 seconds. But don't forget about the half a second spin-up delay, so it does take 4.3 seconds to fully unload from when you initially start to hold the trigger. Within that time, you have an average damage potential of 4,800 total damage. That's more than 1,000 damage per second, and that's the best burst damage in the game, bar none. Once you've unloaded, you're put in a 32-second base reload time, which means your DPM is a total of 8,040 damage per minute. But screw the DPM, this tank is so damn extreme in its potential damage output that when we talk about its damage potential, we're not talking minutes, we're talking seconds. This tank has changed the conversation from DPM to DPS. And now let's of course get into the thing that some people will use as the excuse for why this DPS isn't a bad thing. It's pen. We've already mentioned it, but the AP rounds only have 75mm of pen with 915 shell speed. It has no premium rounds for higher pen either, and the HE is completely rendered useless because of the chip damage we covered already. But not only that, but if there is a lightly armored vehicle you want to use HE on, you have to wait that reload to load it after swapping from AP, and then you might not even pen, as it's only 26mm of pen, and there are plenty of light armored vehicles that this wouldn't even pen, and those that it will still have angles to worry about that will help them against this HE. Not to mention your damage potential goes from 4,800 to 6,720. Sounds like a lot more, but do you see the problem there? It's that you don't need that much more damage to kill any tank in the game. Usually you'd switch to HE to make taking out a target quicker, like back before RD 2.0 with a 120mm, you wouldn't one-shot them with your AP, but loading HE would give you the chance to do so. But there is no tank that you need more than 4800 damage to kill, so swapping to a less reliable round that doesn't have chip damage, splash damage, or pen is just not necessary, especially with the leeway chip damage gives you on the AP. The better reliability to pen lightly armored tanks, and enough damage potential in the AP clip to take out whatever you are looking at. The HE on this tank is so utterly useless and mind-boggling. Like I said earlier, move the chip damage to the HE rounds so the AP can't do guaranteed damage, and if you want to chip away at someone, you have to swap and use the less reliable round. And if anyone thinks that this would just cause HE spam and be a problem in its own right, are you not listening? Because the chip damage already exists on the best round. Moving it to the bad round would balance things out, and if people are choosing to just run HE, guess what? That means they're less likely to be doing damage. And they definitely won't have the pen to pen any heavy tank from the rear like the AP rounds can to Super Conquerors and such. So it's actually beneficial to the players being shot at if everyone in these tanks are just using HE for that guaranteed chip damage instead of the AP rounds. But moving on to the gun handling, it has a .37 base accuracy and a 1.9 second aim time. This tank does not feel like it has much accuracy penalties when firing its entire clip at once. It's very accurate, and vert stabs definitely do not feel necessary. It only has 5 degrees of gun depression, but 85 degrees of elevation. So I guess make sure to take down those planes while you're at it. Moving on to the armor, there's actually something notable about this tank. There is an entire spaced armor plate that goes around the entire midsection of the tank and is raised up and away from the hull as well. It's quite odd looking and isn't part of the actual hitbox and might not seem important, but it is. This is around the area where you would auto-lock the vehicle, and being the bigger hull portion too, it's where you would manually aim center mass anyway to have the best chance of hitting the tank, especially while it's moving. And if you're in a tank with HE rounds, this is something that will eat that HE round up and cause it not to have a full pen. It already happened to me. I played the Type 5 Heavy, and one of these came running at me, and my 1300 Alpha HE round only half health the tank due to its spaced armor. I also absorbed a heat round from a T110E5 because of it too while playing the tank myself. This armor reminds me that of a Cold War tank, or the T114 Bat, where it's overmodeled and creates for much more RNG when shooting the tank. It's not like the Sheridan either, where it's a bigger hitbox of spaced armor than the actual tank that makes for understandable non-pens. This is just spaced armor noise that causes much randomness. But it's not just the box, but other parts like this cheese wedge looking bit and such. It's this trend that started with Cold War and has creeped its way into World War II, especially with tanks like the Avery and the T114 Bat. And I should really make a separate video on this topic in general because it is very annoying. And the perfect example would be the Sturm Tiger to the Ferdinand. But again, I'll save that for a different video. Despite being a light tank, there will be moments where shooting at it can really piss you off, so make sure you're shooting AP and make sure to try and aim for the turret cheeks with your HE, because aiming center mass on the turret too is just a big exposed gun that won't get you any damage. It's not as simple as just hitting the tank with HE to take it out. Also, for the players of the tank itself, there's something to note for you as well. That 5 degrees of gun depression you have becomes like 0 degrees on the left side when aiming over this raised viewport. It's something to be mindful of, but as you're a light tank and not working ridges, the gun depression limitation here, and in general at 5 degrees, shouldn't be that hard to work around in the first place. They did recognize the tank needed to be bad somewhere at least, and decided to give it the lowest tier 10 light tank HP value of 1100. This would allow you to be one shot by 183mm AP rounds, and the Sturm Tiger and Type 5's HE rounds, again if it pens though. So at least there's that going for the player base that has to fight this nuisance. As for its mobility, it's a light tank, and it's as good as you'd expect. It goes 68.4 kilometers forward, which is relatively slow, but still faster than the Sheridan. And it has the best reverse speed at nearly 30, only being beaten by the EBR's 50 reverse. But for tracked tanks, it is the best reverse. Thankfully, it does have the worst in class of something, and that is its power to weight ratio, with its 275 horsepower only giving it a power to weight ratio of under 30 with 29.89. This is even slower than that of the WZ-132-1, and will noticeably take the tank a tiny bit longer to get to full speed compared to other light tanks. But it would still feel like a light tank, and not really feel that bad overall. Its traverse is low too, but not the worst this time at 40 degrees, and again will feel very much maneuverable regardless of others being better. It's gonna feel like a light tank regardless, so not really much more to say here. As for its spotting and concealment capabilities, well, oh boy. Where its speeds could be argued to be among the worst of the tier 10 lights, there is no arguing that this tank is the best when it comes to spotting and concealment. When we saw the article stats of the tank on Monday, we saw it has 410 meters view range. I then hoped its camo would be between that of the 13105 and RHM, so, between 310 to 320 concealment. But then the tank came out, and it has literally the best concealment for any tier 10 light, even beating the EBR by less than a meter, but without the terrible view range of the EBR. And that's just insane. The Mana Core's only hope before it got nerfed was to be the best scout, because it had a very annoying gun. Then they nerfed its view range to 390, and now it kinda sucks, and now the idea of a tank relying on its spotting is given to this vehicle. It is without a doubt the best tier 10 light tank in the game in terms of the light tank's role to spot and stay concealed. There is one aspect of the tank that I do find annoying though, and that's because it doesn't feel intentional. The moment you hold the trigger for the spin up delay is when you lose your concealment factor, not when the gun starts firing itself, which sounds like a minor nitpick, but it is annoying and not cohesive with the game as a whole. Especially too since the gun doesn't visually start to actually spin up during this delay, and doesn't make any noise either. So there's no visual feedback or audio feedback to the delay period either. Just a lag in your brain from holding down the trigger to when you actually begin to fire. It is a bit annoying that there's no visual or audio buildup to help make that smoother and more natural feeling. And because that's not there, being spotted before firing once you break your concealment by touching the trigger does add to the disconnect and unnatural feeling to this tank, because you haven't started firing yet, and yet you broke your concealment by holding down the trigger. And now with its stats gone over, I can safely say that I hate this tank. This tank has introduced such an unfair state to the game, and as my friend Carne pointed out to me, is the quickest and most decisive meta shift I think I've ever seen, at least for the time period. When deciding on what tanks to play, I know I do not want to play tanks like the Leopard 1, my beloved Shpatuk, definitely not an Iron Rain, SU-130PM, Scorpion G, FE-4005, Turan. I don't want to play any light tank either, and surely even artillery players are questioning playing artillery right now. This tank has made players more scared than ever before, because even with the Avery, that was a tank you could outspot, outplay, ignore, and go the other way. This tank is a light tank, and the best one there is. You're being outspotted, outmaneuvered, and destroyed within seconds if you're playing a paper tank. So why play them? If this is Wargaming's way to try and entice players to play super heavies, well, they've sort of succeeded, but it's not the right way. I know there will be comments from players who think 75mm of pen is enough of a downside to call this tank trash or situational at best, but I really beg you to think harder. There is nothing fair about a less than 3-second kill time from the best light tank in the game, even if that time to kill is for tanks with weak armor. It's just too much, and it's not a tank destroyer, it's a light tank. Again, you aren't even safe in all heavy tanks or tank destroyers with enough frontal armor, because this tank runs at you and trades one shot of HP, and then has enough module damage and rounds in the clip to track you twice and still burst you from the side or rear quick enough to kill you in seconds, if you don't have the armor. Like a Super Conqueror with 2400 HP, gone in 2 seconds. Or you just ignore the track, and because it's a light tank that beats your traverse speed, it also gets to just burst you that way. It's not fair. Even if it doesn't happen every game, or very so often, it's not fair. Another point brought up that wasn't my own was the idea that this tank is like artillery. When artillery works, it really works far too well. And when this tank works, it works also far too well. And again, don't forget the leeway of chip damage from when you cannot pen anyway. We all thought the gun would be completely useless against armor, but you can still get guaranteed damage even if you can't pen. This is the dumbest tank I've ever seen be put into the game. So how do we fix it? Well, I have two choices, at least in my opinion. But before we go over the two gun options, let's go over the other stats that I would change regardless of what we would decide to do to the gun. Firstly, its spotting capabilities. If you wanted to have the best camo in the game, I would say it needs less view range. You either nerf the camo to be where I was expecting it, or you nerf the view range to be 390, or better yet, 380. Introduced a new second lowest view range for lights, but still better than the wheels, and you get more fair base view range to camo difference that feels right. There's no reason for this tank to have 113 meters between its camo and view range at base. It's too much. Tanks with better camo tend to have less view range. but yet this doesn't follow that fundamental rule for whatever reason, and the reason shouldn't be the pen. So that's the first thing I would do. Nerf the camo or the view range, not both, just one or the other. Then I would streamline the armor model, but this is something I would do to the game overall to remove BS RNG off of tanks that don't need it or aren't identified by it. At the same time though, I would also buff this thing's HP to 1200. See, I don't just want to nerf the tank into the ground, I would only do this to give it leeway from being one-shotted by 183mm AP rounds. They could still high roll, of course, and the 183mm AP rounds should not be able to reliably one-shot any tank at tier 10. Well, I guess sorry to the tier 8s, though there's nothing I can really do for you guys right now except advocate for +1, -1. Funny enough, even artillery can't be one-shot by these rounds, so why should this thing, right? Now, to be fair to the FV4005, we have the gun changes I'd make to this thing. This is where there begin two options. Option 1 is to add the overheat mechanic. This way we could limit the amount of shells fired and introduce a bit of finesse into the tank rather than holding down the trigger with no thought. Now, the reason this wasn't done in the first place was said to be because this tank, in real life, had a clip-based system. I never like in real life reasonings for my arcade shooter other than the tank existing in real life, especially when we can take liberties for our video game. But sure, if that's the case, then on to option 2, which would share some changes with option 1 as well. Like the change I'd like to make to the rounds, intraclip, and damage. I think the intraclip should be 0.04 seconds. This would extend the time to unload the clip from 3.84 seconds plus the spin-up delay to 7.68 seconds plus the spin-up delay, so just over 8 seconds to unload in one trigger hold. This not only would increase the time to kill, but also let the player themselves manage their shells easier too, with less of, oops, did I hold too long? It gives the player playing the tank more agency of how many shells they spew out with their limited clip. So it's a win-win. The player being shot at has some more time to react, and the player using the tank has more control over how many rounds they want to fire. On top of this though, I would nerf the amount of damage the rounds do from 25 all the way down to 8. This would lower the 192 clip potential from 4800 to 1536. This is still enough to kill tier 8s and other light tanks too, but it's closer to existing clip-based weapon systems already in the game, like the T249 bat and such. It also means you cannot single clip mediums or heavies without a fire or ammo rack, which I would say to remove module damage entirely too, but they're not doing that, so I have to keep in mind the fire potential this thing has when making its damage potential. Now, I'm not just lowering the damage output and time to do so without giving it some help in other departments. Like I said, I don't want to just nerf it into the ground, but I will say I need the chip damage to be moved to the HE. We lower the HE damage itself to 20, giving it a clip potential of 3840 if it pens with the same pen. But with the chip damage being moved over here, its use case would be for chip damage, like normal HE rounds, not really penning. And I'd make the chip damage minimum and maximum 2 to 3 damage rolls, with it not being a chance to do damage but guarantee that it will. Unless shooting spaced armor, of course. The minimum and maximum damage of an 8-second burst would then be 384 to 576. This, of course, is if you only hit 2s or only 3s, which would be virtually impossible, so it would average more between 450 damage per mag dump for 8 seconds. This, remind you, would be over 8 seconds against non-spaced armor, so hitting tracks, guns, ports, side skirts, all sorts would lower the damage output as well. So no need to worry, mouse players, this wouldn't make the tank all of a sudden more deadly. It would still have a hard time, not to mention needing way more clips to do so. But this is just for the HE, and if they want to keep it having a chance, they could do so as well. So we remove chip damage off the AP rounds and give the HE rounds some use. Now, I already said I wouldn't change the pen of the HE rounds from 26, even though I changed the damage value, and that's because the identity of the HE rounds would be then that chip damage. The AP rounds, however, with the lowering of the burst potential and time to kill, I would buff in penetration. I would go to a 130-135 millimeters of pen minimum, and I could see it getting more, but I would hesitate to give it too much. I feel it would be fine giving it not enough pen to pen super heavies still, as you have the HE to deal guaranteed damage, and if we keep it to having no chance but instead guaranteed damage, then it's 300 to 500 damage in a clip. For a light tank, that's pretty good. And obviously with the Rotary Autocannon, its role is not to take out super heavy, so I'm really not sure if I want to give this tank too much AP pen to be able to take out those tanks reliably. Giving it 130 would already make it even more reliable against the front of tanks like Leopard, the Waffle, which right now it cannot easily clip out with the Waffle's armor buff that it got recently. But it would, with 130, it would then make shooting the sides of vehicles also much more reliable as well. So I am willing to hear what the maximum pen allowed could or should be, as I haven't decided on it myself, but I think 130 is a good baseline to start the combo there. It's not nearly double, but it's close. One more thing to mention, however, if we're going to keep the dispersion penalty when firing as lax as it is now, then I would want there to be a change there too, potentially. It needs to bloom really fast to make long distance firing less effective, and to encourage more natural bursting. But then again, this one's kind of optional. And also, of course, with all this being said, the DPS and DPM would change, and so too would the reload. With it taking 8 seconds to dump the clip, I could see the reload getting buffed to as low as 20 seconds. This would then change the DPM value from a potential 8,040, as they put it, to a more respectable 3,270, which is still very high for a light tank, and gives the tank some leeway in its DPM value since you might not pen every single AP round. So personally, I think it's actually a good DPM value to have, and brings the conversation more about DPM since you're not killing a tank in one clip, so you're not worried about DPS. You have the burst damage of autoloaders like normal, and then you have DPM that is stated high, but with your pen is not your optimal DPM to hit, unless of course you're fighting tanks that you can definitely do it to, which then it becomes pretty strong DPM. So a little recap of my suggestions, since there was a lot. We lower the V-Ranger camo, not both, buff the HP and remove some spaced armor from the model, implement the overheat mechanic if we decide not to do that, then make drastic changes to the gun. Still changes would be made with even the overheat though, like less AP damage and clip potential, chip damage moved to the HE only, longer intro clip for a longer DPS period, more pen to compensate only on the AP rounds, buffed reloads to compensate for longer bursts and less damage per clip, and potentially a change to the accuracy penalties, but that last one feels very optional. I think this would just make the tank more fair, engaging to play even, and easier to use even with the slower fire rate, allowing for you to manage your clip dumping better if you didn't want to fire it all at once. Let me know though what you guys think about my changes and if you'd prefer them or not. Remember too, this is a multiplayer game. The game should be fair to not only the person playing the tank, but the person fighting it. And I am definitely tired of hearing people say they have fun in broken tanks because they forget about the player they're destroying. Having no time to react to 4,800 damage being dumped into you in less than 3.8 seconds is ridiculous, especially since they don't need all that time and damage to remove you from the match. So it's even shorter than 3.8 seconds of reaction time. In a game that's not supposed to be reactionary based, as you're limited by not your sensitivity but your tank's rotational speeds and mobility to react to your situations, this is too much. This thing is just absurd, because remember, it's not a tank destroyer, it's a light tank. It's got the mobility to get in, it's got the DPM to remove you, and it has no care in the world whether or not you are a heavy tank for certain ones as well. Okay, so that's the tank and my suggestions to what should be changed, and I almost forgot this is a review, so is the tank worth it? Well, it's a tier 10 on sale for 9,000 gold, and it feels like it's breaking the game. I don't want to say that you should buy it because I don't want to see more of it in my matches, but of course, if you want to experience what being scummy feels like, then by all means, this is your tank. For the health of the game itself, I cannot recommend anyone buy this tank. And let's thank Buck real quick for being the douchebag that yet again gifted me this tank, so I can tell you how much I hate its existence. I'm kidding, he's not a douchebag, he's a great guy. I really hope I conveyed why this tank is way more dangerous than people may think, or make it out to be, just because of its low pen. It is far more than just its low pen and situational power. It is overpowered. This is not a tank to overlook and ignore, nor a tank to call bad. And the worst part is that I fear this tank will only become stronger once things do settle down and players who don't like it stop playing it, and it becomes a tank that when you see it, will determine the outcome of the game. Right now you have a lot of super heavies trying not to be penned by this thing, and people playing to counter one tank in the matchmaker, with lots of passive playing as well. So when players go back to normal, and when there's not 3 per team, this thing could, and I believe, will get stronger. Which is not something I can say about tanks previously that are broken. This vehicle, when there's less of them, when there's not 6 light tanks per team, when you're not playing your super heavies because you've gotten out of this norm, this thing could be a real problem. But now, before I get into the gameplay, I'll show you what I'm running. It doesn't have a gun rammer, so it's a pretty obvious choice to go with optics, camo net, and vents. This also has the benefit of maxing out the view range and camo, while they are already the best in class. No need to make the decision to bring a camo net or gun rammer like you would with a Manicore 100 LT, right? Just another reason the tank is so easy to play. My consumables are my usual premium repair kit, food rations, and standard medkit, and my commander is my light tank setup of 6th Sense, situational awareness, camo expertise, rapid loading, steady aim, born leader, snapshot, run and gun, and marked target. Now into the gameplay. Now we're in the games, but this review is going to be a bit different. I have multiple clips to show you the power of this vehicle in little bites from games where I've either lost or I won, or the result literally doesn't matter. This was just a situation in these matches that were just absurd. And the first one here is just, well, do I even need to describe it? We saw the Bulldog, the 10-round autoloader Bulldog. We saw he's coming towards us, and we just remove him from the game. It's as simple as that, right? It's already 11-5. The damage we had before was me half-healthing a waffle. But the clip's not over, is it? Nope, because we're gonna go and do something else in this match. Now, I'm hoping that I conveyed enough in the review portion of this video that this tank is super, super powerful, and I don't need to harp on it any longer at the latter end of this video, but I decided to put these clips in just to show you, rather than just say it, right? Sorry, Waffle, even though I'm missing a bunch of rounds, you're gone. Seconds. 1,000 damage, just like that. Alright, and on to the next one. I truly do not like this vehicle, and here's a situation where I'm actually in a detrimental situation, but it's not because of the tank I'm in. It's because of the tank they're in. And it's the same one. So they get to the hill first. I was like, okay, whatever. I do this to one of them. I still have more in the mag to finish this one off. Unfortunately, I'm auto-locking like an idiot, and then when I decide to stop auto-locking, I miss a bunch, so I leave him on 14 HP, but he's tracked. Nobody can finish him off, and his platoon mate Bat decides to come running at me now that I'm on reload. I'm hoping that I can reload quick enough. The Bat, oh, he doesn't push me, he doesn't know. But unfortunately, here what happens, look, ready? I can beat this Bat, all I gotta do is procrastinate for 6 seconds. Oh, but there's another T249 shooting at me from all the way on the other side, and then the 1400 HP, or the 14 HP one jumps over and finishes me off. Isn't that cool? Isn't that fun? As Dingus said in the stream when that happened, deserved. Because I just clipped one out and almost clipped the second one out in the same clip, so it deserved that I died there before I could reload, right? But I was so close. On this one, this clip is a bit... This one's just sad. And this one happened on the YouTube stream that I did recently. This week was the first time that I like didn't want to play the game, and it was because, well, do I play this tank and get more footage, or do I play other tanks and die to it, or do I play heavy tanks to counter it? Like, you know, I didn't want to play this week, so I only played 2 days, and these are the clips that I got. So others may have great clips, and you know, Vishaw's got 1,000 or 10,000 damage game you can go watch, but well, goodbye CDC. It was nice knowing you. 1,400 damage gone in seconds. Not even a minute into the match and the CDC's gone. I mean, he's bottom tier and he played forward. Mistake no matter what he's fighting, but boy, oh boy, did I punish him hard, didn't I? Now we skip forward a little bit into this replay, or into this footage, because there was a bit of a time there that I didn't want to just make you sit through. But look who else is making a little mistake. Oh, I didn't even use very much of my clip there, did I? Gone. Gone in seconds. Is it? It's just absurd. It's just so absurd. Next one, we begin at the beginning of a game, because I want to show you how quick you can delete someone, how quick you can, spoiler, how quick you can mess someone's day up. So, beginning of a match, we're going hill. You see how many light tanks there are per team in these clips as well, and how many heavy tanks there are as well. You're seeing a lot of Rogaldorns, you're seeing a lot of Lehman Russes, you're seeing a lot of Mice, E100s, Type 5 heavies, 60 TPs I even saw, way more of, and honestly 60 TP is not a bad choice for fighting against this vehicle because it has enough rear armor, 80 millimeters I believe, to not be penned. That guy didn't even make it up the hill because there was another one there cutting him off, but alright, well, there's still plenty more to go, right? Look right there. If you saw it for the moment, there was a light tank at A5. It's a T249 black. I spot the grill. Alright, let's do this. Notice before I started firing, I got spotted. And the reaction times of 3 people. I got shot from the left, I got shot by the grill, and I got shot by the other T249. Wasn't quick enough to remove me before I could delete that grill. Oh, how fun, right? That grill had a great time. In this situation, I am fighting against another T249 black. We're the only 2 light tanks in the game. What a rarity this was to see. And, well, okay. I outspot him, and, well... there it goes. Gone. Gone. Even at distance. Even at distance. Right? 4,800 damage at distance. It's so much leeway. It's just so much leeway. And again, I really hope this video does a good job pointing out and painting the picture as to why this vehicle is a problem, no matter how low the pen is. The only way they could have made this tank, quote unquote, fair is if it was chip damage only at this point. And it did the same amount of damage that it did, right? So if its AP was like 10 millimeters of pen, and you could only do chip damage, then I would agree with people who would say, this tank is fine. And I'd even be advocating for a buff potentially at that point. But it's not fine. Oh, this T249 black is gonna burnt my light tank, huh? That means I get to burnt you now, die. Simple as that, right? That was his game. Now, I continue this clip because watch what happens here. I expect to be unspotted quickly. I'm not. And then another one starts birding me. Ooh, 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 ooh. I'm even unspotted now, and oh my god. Now, in all these clips too, when I get shot at by one, you can notice like big chunks of HP like disappear off the vehicle. So it feels like they get grouped together, which might make it why it feels pretty accurate, because it doesn't feel like every single round is actually there. They kind of give you groupings. It feels like. I don't know. I can't confirm that, but it feels like. So maybe there's like, I don't know. Maybe that's something to look at as to why it's so powerful. But here we have now a full game. These last 2 bits are going to be full games to showcase the power of the vehicle in a full case scenario. And the first thing we're doing here is, well, we're the best light tank in the game, right? So let's go spotting. We don't have to sit in any of these bushes. We don't have to sit by rocks and try and cower in fear if we get spotted. I'm just playing active. Super active. And, well, if it wasn't another one of me shooting at that guy, he'd be dead by now. I shoot at the enemy T249. We got a lot of block damage because, again, the spaced armor does help. And by block damage, I mean he got a lot of block damage. He got a lot of white reticles. So the spaced armor does help even against itself, but also it doesn't. So he's gone now, though, which means, well, we can do more spotting, right? 1400 already. Defender making a big mistake. Your bottom tier. What are you doing? We got people on the 4 line. We got a G-Sword who wants to make a play. Tortoise that wants to make a play. Okay, that's fine. I'll just keep you spotted. Now, other light tanks could do this, but what can't those other light tanks do that this thing can? Well, if you want 410 view range or 420 view range, you're definitely not getting the camo of this thing. I would have been spotted a lot sooner. This G-Sword would actually probably have a chance at spotting me. Look how close he is to my circle, right? My dotted line. My dotted line would be a lot further if I was in a RHM, if I was in even a 13105 with only 390 view range. If I was in a Sheridan especially, I would have been spotted 100% by that G-Sword. So you get the camo concealment factor of the good light tanks but you don't get the low 390 or lower view range of those light tanks, especially now that the mana core is also 390. So you get good view range and good camo. I get to just do whatever I want really sometimes, and it feels a bit absurd. And then on top of that, I get guaranteed chip damage like I'm some Tusk using HE. And I get to delete other light tanks better than the Tusk and Sheridan with their derp guns. Those were the anti-light tanks before. Well, move over derp gun Sheridan and Tusk. There's a new anti-light tank in the game. And it's this thing. Because the only light tanks that might quote-unquote counter this vehicle or stand a chance against this vehicle are the 100 LT and the WZ-132-1 with their armor profiles, but only frontally. So unless a 100 LT is staring straight at you and you're not getting around it somehow or having it pass by you so you can get its rear and holding your shots a little bit and then just bursting it out on the sides, I mean, sure, they are technically the armored light tanks that can definitely bounce 75mm rounds, but I mean, good luck making that work. I would be so fearful even in those vehicles fighting this tank. We've already done 3,500 spotting. We only have 500 damage. I don't know where I'm going right now. I don't remember coming back here, but maybe I want to go down the 4 line. Then I decide, you know what? Nah, I'm gonna go back. Maybe I'll go and flank in the city or something. Or maybe I'll spot more on the 4 line that Artie will hit or something. I don't know. But we spot that 50B out there. This MBTB is... The MBTB has 420 view range, by the way. After the buff that they gave it this season. Made a video about that as well. So in my first ever game on this on Vineyards, there was an MBTB that was spotting me. He wasn't out-spotting me, obviously, but he was spotting me, and it was scary, but... Oh, hi, 50B. I noticed my reticle's red. Ha! I didn't think I would do that. My reticle was red, and I said, let's go for it. And you saw I missed a lot of rounds, too. But again, 4,800 damage is your clip potential. So if you miss a few rounds, doesn't matter. You still have so much damage potential. It's ridiculous. Like, it's actually absurd. And by the way, I'm making this video super late. If you saw the live stream on YouTube the other day, goodbye other T249. Even with those soft cover and ricochets, I just have so much in the clip. There's so much damage potential that you're gone. They did their stream today. Again, I'm making this very late, but I think it's worth mentioning. They have addressed that they've heard much concern about this tank. I wish this artillery would have given me more damage, but we will take 4,300 spotting on Lakeville the way we played and 2,700 damage. Good game. Good game. Showcased the power of this vehicle. But again, they say that they've heard us. They have a specific section in the Discord for feedback on the Vigilante in particular. And they talked about some other stuff. One important note that I think I am gonna say verbatim potentially is that they said that adjustments may be needed. That makes me happy. Turns out we didn't even finish off with 2799. We actually got to finish off the last tank on the team with some chip damage. Didn't even pen the 2 SDB1. We just chipped it down for its remaining less than 300 HP, and there you go. 3 kills, 3,000 damage, 4,300 spotting. Only a second class. I believe Visha's 10k was only a first class, so there's no way I'm acing this vehicle. That does give me hope that this vehicle will be nerfed. The fact that they said that, right? Adjustments may be needed, or discussions about adjustments are happening or something. The word adjustments does make me hopeful. But if I can be cynical still, even after hearing potentially good news, I fear they're not going to address the proper issues of this vehicle. And potentially we might see something like Artillery 2.0 happen, where the tank only gets worse in terms of power. What if the concerns they're hearing is the lack of pen? What if They don't change the damage potential, but they give it over 100 millimeters of pen for even more reliability. And keep the chip damage on the AP. What if they make the splash radius on the HE bigger to make that more useful? Like, what if the concerns that they have heard are going to result in buffs? I am a little worried as to what they might deem necessary to adjust. And I am concerned, like I said, we could get an Artillery 2.0 where they nerf one or two things, then they overcompensate those nerfs with too many buffs. In my own suggestions, I did compensate some things with some buffs, but they were minimal. And they were only HP and pen. And a reload buff, obviously, for DPM sake. But I don't want this thing to get more powerful. So I'm hopeful the fact that we heard about adjustments. But I'm holding my tongue and you know, with bated breath, I'm waiting to see exactly if we're going to get any adjustments and what they're going to be. This poor Tusk, I missed a few rounds because his center mask got behind the thing. He thought I was unloaded. Nope. Sorry, Tusk. You're gone. 1500 HP, just gone. He made the mistake of not playing this thing, right? So yeah. I'm hopeful, but also skeptical and scared at the same time. So, just putting that out there. They have said adjustments may be necessary. That doesn't mean it's getting buffed or nerfed. That doesn't mean it's getting any changes. But it is more than they usually say about broken tanks. Like, I don't think they said anything about the Night Stalker post-release. About its power, and they're looking into it. Nothing about that. So, it is more than we usually get. But, of course, it's not immediately good news, right? It's only good news until we hear exactly if they're doing it, what they're doing to it, right? So, I just want to put that out there. I am excited at the prospect of nerfs, but also skeptical at the prospect of buffs. So, yeah. This vehicle here too is where I show there's no spin up until you start firing, and you can see in the bottom right the insane amount of camo you lose. So back on the commander portion, you could actually take away marked target for muffled shot potentially to better that getting spotted before you can fire aspect of the vehicle. So if you do spend 9,000 gold for this tank, take that into account. Now, I'm really worried about the fact that there are players that overlook this vehicle already. Here we go, as well as a situation where, oh, he's got 118 HP. I don't care that I can't pen him. I'm just gonna get rid of him. Look at that. Right? 118 HP, you have some armor. It doesn't matter. See? Damage is damage. Doesn't matter how little. And in this situation, too, we're about to show, I'm still on reload. He's still on reload. He's got good traverse that I can't catch his rear. I'm going to put some into him. He does actually reload. He spun me out, though. I have great reverse speed. And even though he started to put rounds into me, I'm a light tank. I get to get around him. I get to reverse around him. And the moment I got his rear, his intro clip is not beating my DPS. It's as simple as that. I am not against rotary autocannons. I am against this tank in particular. This tank needs massive, massive adjustments. And to hear that they might be doing that is great. Until we hear what it is, I'm scared. But this video is long enough, so that is your Vigilante review for you. Screw this tank. I hope it gets nerfed. Thanks for watching. Take care.